In a world where power and control dictate survival, emotions are a dangerous liability. Inside the Louisiana State Penitentiary, better known as Angola, one of the most notorious prisons in America, an affair between an inmate and the woman who ran the facility was not just reckless, it was deadly. The affair should never have happened. A warden with an untarnished reputation, a prisoner with a past wrapped in deception, and a secret that, once uncovered, sealed their fates. What started as stolen moments in the quiet corners of the prison library ended in an act so violent, so deliberate, that it left even seasoned investigators struggling for answers. Tonight, we take you inside Angola, where a prison romance shattered the thin line between authority and captivity. A story of obsession, manipulation, and an irreversible act of vengeance that would leave one dead and another forever haunted. If you believe stories like this need to be told, subscribe now. Because what we're about to uncover is beyond disturbing. Prisons operate on a simple principle: control. Without it, chaos rules. At Angola, control is everything. It is the difference between life and death, between maintaining order and losing all authority. In a place where strength dictates survival, emotions are a liability. That is something Samantha Anderson understood better than anyone. Samantha Anderson had built her career on discipline. At 53, she was one of the most respected female wardens in the country, a rarity in a field dominated by men. Angola was her battlefield, and she ran it like a general, unwavering, efficient, and merciless when necessary. She had spent decades climbing the ranks, earning her place in an institution where women were rarely seen as equals. The job demanded a level of detachment, one that she wore like armor. Samantha didn't have a personal life, at least not in any way that mattered. No close family, no romantic entanglements. Her world was the prison, and that was how she wanted it. Inside those walls there were no distractions, no room for weakness. At least that's what she believed, until Frederick Keedy arrived. Frederick Keedy was not a typical inmate. He wasn't here for robbery, assault, or murder. He wasn't affiliated with a gang, didn't have a violent past. At 34, he was serving a 15-year sentence for grand fraud and embezzlement, a crime that didn't fit the brutality of a place like Angola. And yet, he fit in just fine. A college-educated man, well-read, articulate, a master of deception. He had stolen millions through an elaborate investment scam, leaving a trail of financial devastation. He was a fraudster, not a murderer. But fraud requires a special kind of mind, the ability to manipulate, to adapt, to make people trust you. And that skill, more than anything, is what made Frederick Keedy dangerous. Prison is a system of unwritten rules. Strength is measured in violence, alliances, and dominance. Frederick Keedy had none of those things, but he had something else: persuasion. He didn't need fists, he had words. And words, when used correctly, are more powerful than any weapon. The library at Angola was considered a privilege, a rare escape from the monotony of confinement. It was there, in the quiet among bookshelves and forgotten literature, that Frederick Keedy found his way into the life of Warden Samantha Anderson. It started with casual conversations. Samantha, despite her hardened exterior, had always valued intelligence. A Keedy? He knew exactly what to say. He spoke about history, philosophy, literature. He challenged her perspectives, intrigued her in a way she hadn't felt in years. To outsiders, it was nothing. A warden and an inmate exchanging words. But in a place where conversations are currency, every word mattered. And Frederick Keedy knew how to make each one count. Not everyone was blind to what was happening. Dakota Ramsey, Samantha's second-in-command, had started noticing changes. The warden lingered in the library longer than necessary. Keedy's privileges remained intact despite minor infractions. There was a shift in Angola's hierarchy, one that could not be ignored. Dr. Helena Frost, the prison's medical director, had her own suspicions. She had seen men like Keedy before, charmers, manipulators, and she knew how quickly admiration could turn into something far more dangerous. The line between control and captivity is razor thin. In the shadows of Angola's library, a relationship formed, a secret that would unravel lives, ignite betrayal, and end in blood. Was it love? Or the beginning of something far more destructive? The rules inside Angola were absolute. Boundaries between authority and inmate were never to be crossed. Yet behind the thick concrete walls of Louisiana's most feared penitentiary, one line had already been erased, and it would cost them both everything. At first, their conversations were professional. Samantha prided herself on discipline, on keeping a careful distance. But Keedy knew how to close that distance. He wasn't like the other inmates. He understood people, understood the power of patience. It started with literature, philosophy, long discussions about justice, fate, and human nature. Conversations that stretched beyond the limits of what should have been allowed. There were moments, small at first, that crossed the threshold between duty and something else. A glance held too long, a question too personal, late-night rounds that ended at the library doors, just to check in. And then, the moments stopped being small. They had stepped beyond the point of return, and inside Angola, secrets were never kept for long. Dakota Ramsey had served under Samantha for years. She had studied her, learned her habits, memorized her mannerisms. And now, something was changing. Samantha was staying late, smiling more. The sharpness that once defined her had softened, and Dakota knew better than to believe it was coincidence. Dr. Frost. I knew. The way Samantha looked at him. The way she didn't look at anyone else. She was breaking every rule in the book, and he knew exactly how to make her do it. I've seen it before. Manipulators don't use force. They use trust. And once they have it, they use it against you. Routine medical screenings were standard at Angola. No one expected Samantha's name to come back flagged. But when the test results landed on her desk, the weight of what they meant hit with full force. It wasn't just her own diagnosis. It was confirmation of something far worse. A betrayal so profound it left only one path forward. Frederick Keedy had known. For years, he had never told her. And now, it was too late. Betrayal doesn't always come with a knife. Sometimes it comes with a kiss. Angola had its own justice system, and Samantha had spent decades enforcing it. Now she was about to wield it for herself. Frederick Keedy was moved to Angola's high-security unit, a place designed for the most dangerous men, and he had just been made the most vulnerable among them. Inside these walls, rumors were currency, and whispers of Samantha's affair had already reached the wrong ears. Frederick becomes a target. Keedy's food tray is knocked to the floor in the cafeteria. His bunk is ransacked while he's away. The guards conveniently miss incidents of aggression. The rules had shifted. The same persuasion that had once protected him was now worthless. He had been marked. In Angola, you didn't survive alone. Keedy had no allies left, and the one person who could have protected him had set his fate in motion. February 15th. At exactly 3:27 p.m., Frederick Keedy walked into the prison library for what would be the last time. When the cameras came back online, the only thing left was silence. Frederick Keedy had been stabbed 23 times, his face unrecognizable, his hands bound. A final message, or a cruel irony, left in his grasp. Samantha Anderson never set foot in that room, never spoke a single order. But inside Angola, some debts are collected without a word. A man was dead. A warden had her revenge, and the investigation was only just beginning. Angola had seen its share of bloodshed. Murders inside the prison walls were not uncommon, but this one was different. This wasn't a gang killing, a power struggle, or a senseless act of rage. This was deliberate, calculated, and, as detectives would soon uncover, it wasn't just about revenge, it was about justice, Angola's own version of it. Detective Ashton Graves, 45 years old, a veteran homicide detective with a history of solving violent crimes in Louisiana. Unshaken, methodical, analytical. Detective Sage Malloy, 38 years old, sharp-witted, relentless, with a background in forensic psychology. She sees what others miss. Detective Graves. Louisiana State Penitentiary, the so-called Alcatraz of the South. Maximum security, endless rows of razor wire, and yet, a man was murdered in the library in broad daylight. That doesn't happen unless someone allows it to happen. The first question was simple. How did Frederick Keedy end up alone in the library at the exact moment the cameras malfunctioned? The second question was who wanted him dead enough to make it happen? Detective Malloy. That's 30 minutes of dead air. Cameras don't just fail at convenient times. Someone killed the feed. Detective Graves. The cameras, the timing, the fact that Keedy was transferred to high security days before his death. You understand why we have questions, Warden? Samantha Anderson. I run a prison, detective, not a daycare. People here make enemies. If Keedy crossed the wrong ones, that's on him. Detective Malloy. You were diagnosed. 2 weeks later, the man responsible was dead. The connection is obvious. Too obvious. Samantha was too smart to leave a direct trail. But Angola wasn't a place where things simply happened. Every move had to be approved, every transfer signed off, every guard positioned exactly where they needed to be. And there was one name that came up more than once in the week, leading to Keedy's murder. Roy Harris. Detective Graves. Who ordered the hit on Keedy? Roy Harris. Why does it matter? Some people get what they deserve, detective. That's all I'm saying. Detective Malloy. You're smart, Roy, but not this smart. A library? Broad daylight? Cameras down? This wasn't your plan. You took orders. Roy Harris wasn't the mastermind. He was the executioner. Someone else gave the order. And the only person with enough power to pull every string was Samantha Anderson. Dr. Frost. I saw her change after she got those results. It was like she wasn't even in her body anymore, just going through the motions. Then, one day, she looked focused again. That's when I knew. Detective Malloy. Knew what? Dr. Frost. That she'd made a decision. And once Samantha makes up her mind, she doesn't undo it. Samantha had once dedicated her life to maintaining order. But in her world, betrayal wasn't forgiven. It was punished. Samantha Anderson. You knew. Frederick Keedy. I never wanted this to happen. Samantha Anderson. Tomorrow you'll be transferred to high security. I hope you're comfortable there. Keedy watches her go. He doesn't argue. He doesn't fight it. And for the first time, fear flickers in his eyes. He knows what's coming. Detective Malloy. We know she did it. Detective Graves. Knowing doesn't mean proving. Samantha Anderson had built Angola on control. And in the end, she made sure it remained that way. No direct evidence, no loose ends. Just a message left in the pages of a book, clutched in a dead man's hand. For Detectives Ashton Graves and Sage Malloy, the case against Samantha Anderson had all the markings of premeditated murder, an orchestrated assassination carried out behind the walls of Angola prison. But in the world of criminal justice, knowing the truth and proving it are two very different things. And Samantha Anderson was untouchable. D.A. Vincent Lamar. Look, I don't doubt she did it, but we're talking about a case built on circumstantial evidence, no physical proof, no direct orders, just speculation. That won't stand up in front of a jury. Detective Malloy. Roy Harris didn't kill Frederick Keedy because of prison politics. He was given an order. The cameras were down at the exact time of the murder. The guards were absent. Samantha orchestrated every piece of this. D.A. Vincent Lamar. Then prove it. Without direct evidence, we don't have a case. In the end, there was no confession. No forensic proof linking Samantha to the killing. Just whispers in the prison corridors, and an unspoken understanding between those who knew the system well enough to manipulate it. The case against Samantha Anderson was officially closed. She would never be charged. And Frederick Keedy's death would go unanswered. Judge. In the case of the murder of inmate Frederick Keedy, the court finds the defendant, Roy Harris, guilty of first-degree murder. He is sentenced to an additional life without parole to be served consecutively. Detective Graves. She wins. Detective Malloy. For now. For the men locked inside Angola, the killing of Frederick Keedy was nothing new. Justice inside these walls was never about courtrooms or laws. It was about power. And in the end, Samantha Anderson still had hers. For Samantha, life moved forward. The investigation ended. The world outside Angola had already moved on. But something inside her had changed. The warden who once upheld control with unflinching discipline had grown colder, more ruthless. And the rumors never stopped. Guard 1. You know she did it. Guard 2. Of course she did it. You don't mess with the warden and live to talk about it. Inmate 1. Ain't nobody gonna touch her now. Inmate 2. She's more dangerous than the prisoners. Her power was no longer just official, it was legendary. And in the world of Angola, legends were feared. Dakota Ramsey had been there through it all. She had watched as Samantha's walls cracked, watched as the affair unfolded in secrecy, watched as Frederick Keedy's fate was sealed long before the knife touched his skin, and yet she never said a word. Did she know? Of course she did. But loyalty inside Angola was a currency, and Ramsey had chosen her side. The only person who knew the full truth was Assistant Warden Dakota Ramsey, and she took that secret to her grave. Angola is a machine. It does not stop. It does not mourn. It does not change for the dead. Frederick Keedy became another name added to the prison's long history of violence. His body buried, his case closed. But the questions, they remain. Frederick Keedy was a con man. That much was undisputed. But what kind of man was he truly? Was he capable of love? Or was love just another illusion? Another deception, like the money he stole, the trust he broke? To understand the depth of this story, we have to understand him. Dr. Dorsey. Con artists aren't just good liars. They're believable liars. The best ones study people like a science, watching, learning, adapting. They mimic emotions. They make you feel seen, feel understood. And once you trust them, that's when they strike. Even in his trial, Keedy never lost control. He did not rage. He did not weep. He did not beg for mercy. He accepted his sentence with the same composure he had in every con he ever ran. Because for him, this was just another game to play. Was it love? Or was it survival? Some argue that Keedy truly cared for Samantha Anderson. That in her, he saw something familiar. Someone strong. Someone trapped by the expectations of the world around them. Others believe he was playing his longest, most dangerous con yet, and when it backfired, it cost him his life. If I could take it back, I would. But I can't. I never meant to hurt you, Merritt. Did he regret what he had done? Or was this simply another performance? One last attempt to control the narrative from beyond the grave? Samantha Anderson had spent a lifetime enforcing rules. She had become the rules. But when it mattered most, she did what she had punished others for. She let her emotions dictate her actions. The very thing she had once despised had unraveled her, turned her into something else. Revenge is often mistaken for justice. In Samantha's case, the two became indistinguishable. Whether she gave the order directly or not, the fact remains. Frederick Keedy died because she wanted him to. The system she had once used to uphold the law had become her weapon. Did she mourn him? Did she regret the choices she made? Or did she simply turn the page and never look back? There was no trial for Samantha Anderson, no reckoning. She continued her work at Angola as if nothing had happened. But something had changed. The prison, the staff, the inmates, they all knew. There were no illusions anymore. In prison, silence is its own kind of loyalty, and Dakota Ramsey had chosen hers. Detective Malloy. She got away with it. Detective Graves. They always do. Justice inside Angola was never about truth, it was about power. And in the end, Samantha Anderson did what she had always done. She controlled the narrative. She controlled the outcome. The only question that remains is whether she regrets it. What do you think? Was Samantha Anderson a heartbroken victim or a ruthless mastermind? Let me know in the comments.